Imagine you've been living your entire life believing you're trapped in a prison, only to discover the door was never locked. This is the profound realization at the heart of Eckhart Tolle's teachings. The mind, with all its thoughts, fears, and conditioned patterns, acts as an invisible cage, one so familiar that most people never question its existence. But what if the suffering, anxiety, and restlessness so many experience aren't inevitable? What if the way out has always been within reach? Human beings have spent centuries searching for happiness, fulfillment, and inner peace. Entire industries are built around fixing, improving, or healing some perceived flaw within us. But beneath all these efforts lies a deeper truth, one that, once seen, changes everything. The root of suffering isn't the world outside, but the unchecked activity of the mind itself. The endless thinking, the relentless narratives, the constant pull of past regrets and future worries. This is the real source of suffering. And yet, in the very mechanism that creates pain, there exists the key to liberation. What if a single shift in perspective could dissolve the illusion of psychological imprisonment? What if the very thoughts that seem to define existence could be recognized as fleeting, impermanent, and ultimately powerless without belief? This is not a far-off dream or an abstract philosophy. It is a radical possibility, one that has the power to free anyone from the cycle of mental suffering, not just temporarily but permanently. Eckhart Tolle's insights hold such transformative power because they don't offer more knowledge, more theories, or more concepts to grasp. Instead, they reveal a direct experience, a way of seeing reality that dismantles every layer of unnecessary struggle. His teachings don't add anything new. They strip away what was never real to begin with. And what remains is something astonishingly simple. A presence, a stillness, a peace that has been there all along. Each of his words carries the potential to unlock a deeper truth about existence. And it only takes one moment of true recognition to see through the illusion that has kept the mind running in endless loops. The freedom spoken of is not in some distant future. It is here now, waiting to be noticed. This is not just philosophy. It is an invitation to step beyond the confines of thought, to question the nature of identity itself, and to awaken to a reality far vaster than the mind can conceive. Understanding Eckhart Tolle. There are moments in life when suffering reaches a breaking point, when the mind can no longer sustain the weight of its own torment. For Eckhart Tolle, that moment arrived on a night of unbearable despair. He had spent years trapped in the relentless grip of depression and anxiety, drowning in a constant storm of self-destructive thoughts. But then, something extraordinary happened. In a single instant, the identity he had built, the mental construct of himself, collapsed. And in the space left behind, there was only silence, only presence, only peace. This was not just a fleeting experience. It was a permanent shift, a fundamental transformation that shattered everything he once believed about life, suffering, and identity. The fear, the turmoil, the endless thinking, they all fell away. And what remained was something untouched by the mind's stories, a stillness beyond words. This single night would mark the beginning of an entirely new way of being, one that would go on to inspire millions across the world. Tolle's teachings are not complex philosophies or intellectual ideas. They are direct transmissions of truth, distilled from the same realization that has echoed through ancient wisdom traditions for centuries. The idea that suffering is not caused by external circumstances but by the mind's identification with thought. That true peace is not something to be achieved but something already present beneath the noise of the mind. That the past and future are illusions and reality, life itself, only exists in this moment, right now. In a world consumed by mental noise, this message has resonated deeply. His book The Power of Now has reached countless readers, not as a self-help manual, but as a doorway into an entirely new way of perceiving life. People across cultures, backgrounds, and belief systems have felt an immediate recognition in his words, as if something long buried within them was suddenly awakened. Because at its core, his teaching is not about learning something new. It is about remembering what has always been true. Each of his insights functions like a key, unlocking different dimensions of consciousness. Some dissolve the illusion of thought-based identity. Others expose the nature of psychological time. Some reveal the mechanisms of the ego, while others unveil the hidden source of emotional suffering. But together, they form a complete path, a path leading not to a future goal, but to a direct, living experience of reality as it is. The journey ahead is not one of adding, striving, or becoming. It is one of seeing, realizing, and simply being. You are not your thoughts. Imagine your mind as an endless movie theater. Thoughts appear on the screen, one after another, playing out stories of the past, worries about the future, and interpretations of the present. But here's the question. Who is watching the show? Most people never ask this question. They assume that if a thought arises in their mind, it must belong to them. They believe every story the mind tells, every judgment it makes, and every problem it presents. But what if that assumption is completely false? What if thoughts don't actually define you at all? This realization is the foundation of freedom. The suffering, stress, and overthinking that dominate so many lives are not caused by external events, but by the mind's unchecked activity. Thoughts arise, triggering emotions, which then reinforce more thoughts, creating an endless loop of identification. But in reality, thoughts are just patterns of mental energy, appearing and disappearing on their own. The question is, do you have to believe them? From an early age, the mind absorbs information from parents, teachers, culture, and personal experiences. It then turns this information into an internal dialogue, shaping how reality is interpreted. Over time, these thought patterns become habitual, creating the illusion of a fixed personality or identity. Some minds generate fear-based thoughts, predicting worst-case scenarios at every turn. Others create self-critical loops, reinforcing the belief of not being good enough. Some minds live in the past, replaying regrets, while others remain consumed by future worries, imagining outcomes that may never happen. Regardless of the content, all of these thoughts have one thing in common: they are not reality. They are interpretations, filtered through past conditioning. The mind's job is to think, and it does this automatically. If left unchecked, it will keep running, generating an endless stream of commentary. But here's the key insight. Just because a thought arises does not mean it is true. Thoughts are often contradictory, irrational, and influenced by unconscious fears. One moment, a thought may say, "I should take a risk and follow my dreams." And the next, it may say, "That's too dangerous. I'll fail." If thoughts were an absolute truth, they would not constantly change. The fact that they do means they cannot be trusted as a source of ultimate reality. Between each thought, there is a space, a silent gap, and in that space something profound can be noticed: awareness itself. This awareness is not another thought. It does not come and go. It is the unchanging presence that simply sees. The moment this is recognized, a shift occurs. The identification with thinking weakens, and instead of being lost in mental stories, there is an ability to step back and observe. Thoughts still arise, but they lose their grip. They are no longer seen as personal, but as passing clouds in the sky of consciousness. The key to breaking identification with thought is not to fight or suppress thinking, but to observe it without attachment. When a thought arises, instead of automatically believing it, there is the option to pause and ask, who is noticing this thought? In that moment, attention shifts from being immersed in the mental narrative to being the awareness behind it. This single shift is the beginning of true freedom. Another powerful practice is simply noticing the gaps between thoughts. When the mind slows down, there are brief moments of stillness, tiny pauses where no thought is present. In these moments, there is no suffering, no problem, no fear. The more these gaps are noticed, the more they expand. The mind begins to quiet on its own, not through effort, but through recognition that thinking is not the core of who you are. Meditative practices can also deepen this awareness. One simple method is to close the eyes and focus on the breath. Thoughts will still arise, but instead of engaging with them, attention remains on the breathing. Over time, a deeper sense of presence develops. The breath continues, awareness remains, and the realization dawns. Thoughts come and go, but something remains constant. That something is not the mind, it is the silent awareness beyond it. As this realization deepens, something remarkable happens. Thoughts lose their authority. They may still appear, but they no longer dictate emotions or actions. There is an ability to see them for what they are, passing phenomena, no different from sounds in the environment or sensations in the body. The mind no longer runs life. Instead, life unfolds in a state of presence. Detaching from thought does not mean thoughts disappear forever. The mind will continue to generate them, just as the heart continues to beat. But the difference is that there is no longer identification with them. They are seen as tools, useful when needed but not an ultimate source of truth. When thinking is required, it can be used consciously. When it is not, it can be allowed to settle, leaving behind only presence and peace. Signs of progress in detaching from thought include a sense of inner spaciousness, a reduction in mental noise, and an increased ability to remain present. Emotional reactions become less intense because thoughts no longer fuel them. There is a natural ease, a flow to life, where moments unfold without excessive interpretation. The past and future lose their grip, and reality is experienced directly, without the filter of constant mental commentary. The shift from identification with thought to awareness of thought is the foundation of awakening. It is not an intellectual process, but an experiential one. The moment it is seen that thoughts are not who you are, a doorway opens, one that leads beyond the mind, into the vast, silent presence that has always been there. The present moment is filled with joy. What if everything you need for complete fulfillment exists right now? This is not just an abstract idea. It is a direct experience available to anyone who truly sees beyond the mind's illusions. Yet, for most people, joy seems distant, something that must be pursued, earned, or waited for. The mind constantly projects happiness into the future. Once I achieve this, once I have that, then I will finally be happy. But this belief is the very thing that keeps joy out of reach. True joy is not something that needs to be found. It is already here, hidden beneath the mind's restless search. Most people confuse joy with pleasure or temporary happiness. Pleasure comes from external sources, success, relationships, achievements, or material possessions. But pleasure is always fleeting. The mind enjoys it briefly, then starts seeking the next thing. This cycle of wanting and getting never leads to lasting contentment. The deeper truth is that real joy is not dependent on any external circumstance. It arises naturally when attention is fully placed in the present moment. The reason most people don't experience this is that their attention is rarely in the now. The mind is habitually focused on either the past or the future. It replays old memories, regrets, and stories, or projects itself forward into desires, worries, and expectations. In doing so, it overlooks the simple aliveness of this moment. But right here, in the now, there is always an underlying peace, an effortless sense of being that exists before thoughts complicate it. Even in ordinary moments, the gateway to joy is always available. Simple things, a breath, the feeling of the wind against the skin, the sound of birds in the distance, contain a depth that is missed when the mind is distracted. When attention fully lands on any present experience, even something as simple as the sensation of water on the hands while washing them, a shift occurs. That moment is no longer mundane. It becomes vivid, alive, complete in itself. The secret to joy is not in what is happening, but in how present you are to it. Attention is the key. The deeper the presence, the more vibrant reality becomes. Even the most ordinary activities, walking, eating, listening, become gateways into an effortless sense of peace. There is no need to chase something better. When presence deepens, the simplest things reveal their richness. A quiet moment, a deep breath, a single step, each one contains everything. When attention is fully here, time disappears. The past and future are mental constructs that exist only in thought. But the present is always real, always now. In presence, there is no waiting for a better moment to arrive. This realization transforms life itself because suddenly, nothing is lacking. There is no missing piece. Nothing needs to be different for wholeness to be experienced. The joy of simply being is enough. This does not mean challenges do not arise. Difficult situations, loss, or uncertainty still happen. But the difference is that presence changes how these experiences are met. Instead of resisting or mentally escaping, there is an ability to stay fully present with what is. Paradoxically, this presence dissolves suffering. Even pain, when met with full awareness, loses its sharpness. Resistance amplifies suffering. Acceptance dissolves it. To cultivate deeper presence, practices can be applied in daily life. One simple but powerful practice is to pause throughout the day and ask, "Am I fully here?" The mind often rushes ahead, thinking about the next thing, the next task, the next problem. But the body is always here. Sensing the body, feeling the breath, listening to the surrounding sounds. These are instant anchors into presence. Another practice is to use daily activities as reminders to return to now. Eating, walking, drinking water, or even hearing a sound can become moments of mindfulness. Instead of engaging in these activities absent-mindedly, they can be done with total attention. Drinking tea, for example, can be a deep experience. Feeling the warmth of the cup, tasting each sip, being fully immersed in the act without mental distraction. The simplest things become profound when met with complete awareness. A deeper level of presence arises through conscious breathing. The breath is always happening in the now. By bringing attention to the inhalation and exhalation, the mind naturally quiets. Even one full, conscious breath is enough to break identification with thinking and return awareness to the moment. Regular practice of this deepens the ability to remain present, even in situations that typically trigger stress or distraction. Another powerful approach is to observe how the mind creates dissatisfaction. The moment a thought arises that says, "This moment is not enough," there is an opportunity to see through it. The mind always wants more. It believes fulfillment is in the next thing. But seeing this pattern is enough to weaken it. Instead of following the thought, there is a choice: to drop it and return to what is actually happening here and now. Joy is not something to wait for. It is not something to seek. It is what remains when the mind's search ceases. It is found in the smallest details, the simplest experiences, the silent presence that is always here. The deeper this is realized, the more life itself becomes an expression of joy, independent of circumstances. Common obstacles to experiencing joy include mental restlessness, attachment to thoughts, and deep-seated conditioning that equates happiness with future attainment. The mind is conditioned to believe that happiness depends on external success, relationships, or validation. But none of these bring lasting fulfillment. They create temporary pleasure, followed by more wanting. The real shift occurs when fulfillment is no longer sought outside but recognized as something that has always been present within. Another obstacle is emotional resistance. Unprocessed emotions often create a barrier to joy. When there is unresolved fear, anger, or sadness, it can overshadow the natural lightness of presence. The key is not to suppress these emotions but to allow them fully, without resistance. Meeting emotions with full awareness dissolves their hold, making space for a deeper sense of peace to emerge. Life does not need to be perfect for joy to be present. In fact, joy is often most accessible when expectations are released. There is nothing to fix, nothing to improve, nothing to become. The simple realization that this moment is already enough is the doorway to freedom. Advanced techniques for deepening presence involve sustained awareness practice. This can include sitting in stillness, simply observing everything as it is, without labeling or analyzing. Another method is practicing micromeditations, brief moments of total awareness scattered throughout the day. These reinforce the habit of being fully present, even in daily life's busiest moments. Another deep practice is surrendering to the flow of life itself. Instead of trying to control every aspect of experience, there is a letting go, a trust in the unfolding of the present. This does not mean passivity. It means fully engaging with what is, without mental resistance. When this becomes natural, life is no longer a struggle. It moves effortlessly, with joy at its core. The more presence deepens, the more joy becomes the default state. Not the fleeting high of excitement, but the quiet, steady joy that comes from simply being. It does not depend on good or bad days, on gain or loss, on achievement or failure. It is always here, beneath every moment, waiting to be recognized. And once it is, the entire search for happiness ends. Not because happiness has been found, but because it was never lost. The power of now is the only power you have. Why do past masters say power exists only in this moment? The answer is simple but profound. Because the present moment is the only reality. The past is nothing but memories stored in the mind. The future is nothing but mental projections and imagined possibilities. Neither exist anywhere except in thought. Yet, most people spend their lives trapped in these illusions, constantly reliving past regrets or anticipating future outcomes. This is the root of human suffering, the inability to recognize that life only ever happens now. The mind, however, does not easily accept this truth. It is addicted to time, constantly oscillating between past and future, creating an endless stream of thoughts. But this thinking is rarely useful. It is often filled with worry, regret, or longing. When identified with these thoughts, a person becomes lost in them, disconnected from the reality of now. And in this disconnection, power is lost. The only real power anyone has is the power of presence, the ability to be fully here, fully awake in this moment, free from the illusion of psychological time. Psychological time is not the same as practical time. Practical time allows for planning, remembering, and functioning in daily life. But psychological time is the mind's habit of obsessing over what has already happened or what might happen. It creates suffering by making the present moment feel inadequate. This is why so many people feel an underlying sense of restlessness, as if life is always happening somewhere else, just out of reach. But this is a trick of the mind. Nothing is missing. The fullness of life is here, now. The illusion of time-based suffering is deeply embedded in human consciousness. People believe their happiness lies in the future. One day, when I achieve this, when I have that, then I will be at peace. But this day never comes because as soon as one goal is reached, the mind immediately sets another. This is the cycle of perpetual dissatisfaction. The same illusion applies to the past. People carry stories of regret, resentment, and identity based on past experiences. But these memories are not who they are only mental images. The real self is not in time. It is in presence. Understanding this is the key to freedom. The moment it is seen that the past and future only exist in thought, a radical shift occurs. There is nothing to wait for. There is no next moment that will complete anything. Completion is already here. This realization does not mean abandoning responsibility or future planning. It means no longer being psychologically enslaved by time. Plans can be made, actions can be taken, but there is no mental escape from the present. This is true power, the power to act from a state of presence rather than a state of fear or desire. True power is not control. It is not forcing circumstances to be a certain way. It is the opposite. It is being so present that external events lose their ability to dictate inner peace. Most people believe power comes from external achievements, influence, or status. But none of these provide real strength. They can be taken away in an instant. Real power is unshakable because it is not dependent on anything outside. It comes from being fully anchored in presence, untouchable by past wounds or future anxieties. This is why the most powerful people in history were often those with an immense presence. People who did not operate from fear, reactivity, or need. They were not trapped in their thoughts. They were rooted in the reality of now, acting with clarity, rather than from unconscious conditioning. Presence allows for this clarity. When the mind is still, free from compulsive thinking, the right action naturally arises. There is no need for excessive analysis, hesitation, or doubt. Life flows effortlessly from presence. There are simple but profound techniques to cultivate this state of presence. The first is to develop awareness of thought patterns. The moment a thought arises about the past or future, it can be observed rather than believed. Instead of getting lost in a mental story, there is a choice to return attention to now. This can be done by focusing on the breath, feeling the body, or simply noticing the surrounding environment. The more this practice is applied, the easier it becomes to break free from compulsive thinking. Another technique is to use life's daily challenges as opportunities for presence. Any moment of stress, frustration, or impatience is an invitation to return to now. Instead of reacting from unconscious patterns, there is a pause. In that pause, a shift happens, from automatic reactivity to conscious awareness. This shift is what transforms suffering. It allows life to be met with clarity rather than resistance. Deepening presence also involves noticing how the mind creates problems that don't actually exist. Most worries are based on imagined futures that may never happen. Even if they do, the mind's resistance to them only creates unnecessary suffering. The truth is, when challenges arise, they are always dealt with in the present. Solutions emerge in the now, not in imagined future scenarios. Realizing this dissolves much of life's unnecessary stress. The practice of surrender is another powerful method for stepping into now. Surrender does not mean passivity, it means accepting reality as it is, instead of mentally fighting against it. This acceptance instantly removes suffering because suffering is not caused by situations themselves but by resistance to them. Once resistance drops, clarity arises. The next action becomes obvious, not from a place of fear, but from a place of deep presence. One of the most advanced presence practices is to observe the gap between thoughts. Most people assume thinking is continuous, but in reality, there are silent spaces between each thought. These spaces are pure awareness. The more attention is placed on them, the longer they become. Eventually, presence becomes the natural state rather than the exception. This is when deep peace arises, not because anything changed externally, but because identification with thought dissolved. A useful way to measure progress in presence practice is by noticing how often attention drifts into past or future thinking. The less this happens, the stronger presence becomes. Another sign is how quickly suffering dissolves. If challenges no longer create prolonged distress, but are met with clarity and acceptance, this is a sign of deepening presence. With time, presence becomes effortless. There is no longer a need to practice it, it simply becomes the way of being. Life is no longer seen through the filter of past experiences or future worries. It is met as it is, fresh, alive, and whole in every moment. This is the ultimate freedom, the realization that power is not something to gain. It is already here, waiting to be recognized in the infinite now. The ego is a feeling of separateness. What if your sense of self is the greatest illusion? The mind tells a story of identity, shaping a personal narrative that seems solid, real, and unchangeable. But what if that identity is nothing more than a mental construct, a collection of past experiences and conditioned beliefs? This is the fundamental insight into the nature of the ego. It is not who you truly are. It is only a sense of separateness, a psychological phantom that gives the illusion of an individual self, distinct from the rest of existence. From birth, the ego is formed through identification. It begins with a name, a body, a family, a culture, and a series of experiences that create the perception of an isolated me. This sense of self deepens over time, reinforced by societal expectations, personal achievements, and emotional wounds. It constructs a mental image of who it believes itself to be, and then fiercely defends that image. But this identity is fragile. It depends on constant validation, comparison, and reinforcement. The ego thrives on separateness. It needs conflict, opposition, and distinction to survive. One of the most deceptive aspects of the ego is that it convinces people that they are their thoughts, emotions, and roles in life. A person says, "I am successful, I am a failure, I am a kind person, I am unworthy." But who is the I that is being described? The ego clings to these labels, defining itself by achievements, relationships, opinions, and even suffering. It identifies with problems because problems reinforce the sense of me as a separate entity. Even pain becomes part of the identity, Without struggle, who would the ego be? The ego does not want presence. Presence dissolves it. The moment a person becomes fully aware, fully here, the ego begins to lose its grip. This is because the ego exists only in time. It needs the past to define itself and the future to sustain its sense of importance. Without time, the ego has nowhere to stand. That is why the mind constantly seeks distractions, clings to grievances, and creates imaginary future scenarios. Anything to avoid the stillness of now, where the illusion of separateness begins to fade. The ego also creates division, not just internally, but externally. It categorizes people, ideas, and experiences into us versus them, right versus wrong, better versus worse. This division is what fuels conflict, both within the individual and in the world at large. Nations go to war, relationships break down, societies remain trapped in cycles of suffering, all because of the illusion of separateness. If the ego sees itself as separate, it must always compete, defend, and seek superiority. But if that separation is only a mental construct, then none of it is necessary. Understanding this is the first step in dissolving the ego. Once it is seen that the ego is not who you are, its control begins to weaken. However, the ego does not disappear easily. It resists. It fights for survival. It will use fear, doubt, and distraction to keep its illusion intact. It will even use spiritual concepts to reinforce itself, claiming superiority through knowledge, awakening, or enlightenment. I am more conscious than others. The ego will say, subtly rebuilding itself even in the process of dissolution. The survival mechanisms of the ego are deeply ingrained. It seeks attention, even through suffering. It feeds on comparison, always measuring itself against others. It creates stories of victimhood or entitlement. It uses emotions like anger and resentment to strengthen its sense of identity. The more reactive a person is, the more the ego is in control. But presence is the antidote. The moment awareness is brought to these patterns, they begin to lose their power. Reaction is replaced with observation. Instead of identifying with a thought or emotion, there is a witnessing of it. One of the most effective practices for dissolving the ego is simply to notice it in action. When does the mind seek validation? When does it feel superior or inferior? When does it react defensively? Each moment of awareness weakens the illusion of separateness. Over time, the space between the ego's reactions and the deeper presence grows wider. There is no longer automatic identification with thoughts or emotions. Instead, there is choice. Advanced ego awareness involves going even deeper, seeing the ego not just as an individual phenomenon, but as a collective one. The same patterns that operate within an individual operate within groups, cultures, and societies. The collective ego takes the form of national identities, political ideologies, and religious divisions. It functions on the same principle: separation, conflict, and the need to be right. When seen from this perspective, the absurdity of ego-based conflict becomes clear. Nations fighting over borders, people clashing over beliefs, entire societies divided by illusions. It is all the same fundamental misunderstanding playing out on a larger scale. Recognizing the collective ego does not mean resisting it. Resistance only strengthens it. Instead, awareness itself is the dissolution. The moment something is fully seen, it begins to lose its unconscious hold. The world's conflicts, whether personal or global, all stem from the same illusion, that separation is real. But when presence is cultivated, the falsehood of separateness is exposed. Instead of opposition, there is connection. Instead of fear, there is understanding. Dissolving the ego does not mean erasing individuality. It does not mean passivity or lack of boundaries. True presence allows for authentic expression, not one dictated by conditioning, but one that flows naturally from awareness. The difference is that it is no longer based on a false sense of me that needs validation or control. It is no longer driven by fear. Actions arise not from egoic desire, but from clarity. There are practices that accelerate this dissolution. One is deep self-inquiry, asking, "Who am I?" Not as an intellectual exercise, but as a direct experience. Each time an answer arises, I am this body, I am this mind, I am my past. It is examined. Is this truly who I am? The deeper this inquiry goes, the more the ego unravels. Another practice is surrender, allowing life to be as it is, without the ego's resistance. The ego thrives on control, trying to manipulate outcomes, resist change, and fight against what is. But surrender is the ultimate release. It is the recognition that the present moment does not need to be different. This acceptance shatters the ego's grip, revealing a deeper peace that has always been present beneath the illusion of separateness. Measuring progress in ego dissolution is not about achieving a state of no ego. The very desire to be free from ego can itself be an egoic trap. Instead, progress is measured in how often presence replaces reactivity. Are thoughts still taken personally? Do emotions still dictate reactions? Does separation still feel real? The more these patterns dissolve, the closer one comes to the truth. There is no separate self. There never was. There is only life, unfolding in the eternal now, free from the illusion of me and mine. As this realization deepens, a profound shift occurs. Life is no longer filtered through the mind's stories. The need to defend, compare, and accumulate fades. What remains is simplicity, clarity, and peace. The world is seen not as a collection of separate beings, but as a seamless whole. The ego dissolves not through force, but through the light of awareness. And in that light, what was once believed to be me disappears, revealing the timeless presence that has always been there. Pain body, a pattern of negative emotions. How does emotional pain become an invisible identity? Hidden beneath the surface of daily life, an unseen force operates within the human psyche, a reservoir of accumulated suffering that influences thoughts, reactions, and behaviors. This is the pain body, an energy field of past emotional wounds that continuously seeks expression. It feeds on negative emotions, perpetuating cycles of suffering that feel inescapable. Yet, like the ego, the pain body is not who you truly are. It is only a pattern, a deeply ingrained habit of identification with pain. Seeing it for what it is begins the process of liberation. The pain body is formed early in life, shaped by unresolved emotional experiences. A child who feels abandoned, criticized, or rejected absorbs that pain, not just mentally, but energetically. If the suffering is not fully processed, it does not simply disappear, it gets stored. Over time, these stored emotions solidify into an unconscious identity. The person begins to carry pain as if it were a fundamental part of who they are. It shapes their sense of self, influencing how they see the world, how they interact with others, and how they respond to challenges. The pain body is not just personal. It is also collective. Families, communities, cultures, and entire nations carry layers of accumulated suffering. The unresolved grief of ancestors, the historical wounds of oppression, the deep-seated fears of entire societies. All of this contributes to the collective pain body. It expresses itself through conflicts, generational trauma, and recurring societal patterns of fear, violence, and division. Recognizing that suffering is often inherited, rather than purely personal, is a powerful shift in perception. It allows for the possibility of breaking free from cycles that have been passed down for generations. The pain body operates in cycles. It has dormant phases and active phases. When dormant, it lurks beneath the surface, influencing thoughts and emotions in subtle ways. But when activated, it takes full control. It seeks fuel, triggering situations that generate more pain so that it can feed itself. A seemingly minor inconvenience, an insult, a delay, a criticism, can suddenly unleash an overwhelming emotional reaction. This is not because of the situation itself, but because the pain body has been awakened. When activated, the pain body distorts perception. It magnifies problems, turns neutral situations into threats, and creates a sense of victimhood. A person in the grip of their pain body feels justified in their suffering. They see the world through a lens of negativity, interpreting every event as further proof of their pain. This is why arguments escalate, why resentment lingers, why certain emotions seem impossible to let go of. The pain body thrives on reactivity. It wants conflict, sadness, anger, and drama because that is what sustains it. The first step in breaking free from the pain body is to recognize its existence. Most people are so identified with their emotions that they do not see them as separate. They say, "I am angry, I am hurt, I am depressed," without realizing that these are not who they are. They are simply temporary energetic patterns passing through awareness. The moment this is seen, a shift occurs. Instead of being consumed by emotions, there is now a witnessing of them. A person can then say, "This is the pain body in action," rather than believing they are the pain. Awareness alone begins to weaken the pain body's hold. When an emotion arises, instead of reacting automatically, there is space. This space allows for conscious choice rather than unconscious repetition. Instead of lashing out, shutting down, or spiraling into despair, there is an opportunity to observe the pain body without feeding it. The pain body cannot survive in the light of presence. It needs unconsciousness to thrive. The more it is seen, the less control it has. Pain body triggers vary from person to person. Some are activated by criticism, others by rejection, others by failure, abandonment, or loss. Becoming aware of personal triggers is essential. What situations create strong emotional reactions? What thoughts tend to arise? What physical sensations accompany them? The more awareness is brought to these patterns, the more their automatic nature is disrupted. Releasing the pain body does not mean suppressing emotions. Suppression only strengthens it. Instead, it means allowing the pain to be fully felt without identifying with it. This is where deep presence is required. When an emotion arises, rather than resisting it or getting lost in it, there is a simple witnessing. This is a wave of sadness. This is a surge of anger. Instead of pushing it away or letting it take over, there is stillness. In this stillness, the pain body begins to dissolve. Advanced practices for pain body release involve deeper levels of awareness. One such practice is conscious breathing. When the pain body is activated, the breath tends to become shallow and constricted. By bringing full attention to slow, deep breathing, the energy of the pain body begins to shift. The breath acts as an anchor to the present moment, preventing complete identification with the emotion. Another powerful method is body awareness. The pain body often manifests as physical tension, a tight chest, a clenched jaw, a heaviness in the stomach. By bringing full attention to these sensations without resistance, their intensity begins to lessen. Instead of suppressing or reacting, there is a direct experience of the energy itself. When fully felt without mental commentary, the energy of the pain body naturally transforms. Silence is another profound tool. The pain body thrives on mental noise. It feeds on repetitive thoughts, old narratives, and inner dialogue. But in deep silence, without labeling or storytelling, the pain body has nothing to attach to. It is simply seen for what it is, an energy pattern, not an identity. When met with full presence, without resistance, it loses its grip. The process of dissolving the pain body does not happen overnight. It is a gradual unlayering. Some aspects release quickly, while others resurface repeatedly until they are fully seen. The key is persistence, returning to presence each time the pain body activates. Instead of judging the process, it is met with compassion. Each time awareness replaces reactivity, progress is made. One of the most surprising aspects of this journey is that when the pain body is no longer in control, life itself begins to change. Relationships improve because interactions are no longer dictated by old wounds. Small frustrations no longer escalate into suffering. The emotional heaviness that once seemed permanent begins to lift. What remains is a natural sense of peace, an openness to life that was previously blocked by layers of accumulated pain. Tracking pain body dissolution involves observing changes in emotional reactivity. Are the same triggers still activating intense emotions? Is there more space between reaction and awareness? Is suffering still seen as personal, or is it recognized as an impersonal energy passing through? The more these shifts occur, the closer one comes to true emotional freedom. The pain body is not an enemy. It is simply an unconscious pattern. It is not something to be fought or eradicated, but something to be brought into awareness. The moment it is fully seen, it begins to dissolve. And what remains when all pain dissolves? Clarity beyond suffering. A state of being that is untouched by past wounds. A presence that is no longer burdened by the weight of accumulated emotions. When the pain body no longer runs life, a new reality emerges. One where reactions are no longer automatic, where old emotional patterns no longer dictate the present moment. Instead of being controlled by unconscious suffering, there is a deep inner stillness. The illusion of an identity based on pain disappears, revealing a truth that was always there. Peace was never something to be found, only uncovered. It was never outside. It was simply hidden beneath the layers of suffering that were mistaken for the self. You are not your pain body. What remains when all pain dissolves? When all suffering, all emotional burdens, and all attachments to past wounds fade away, what is left? This is the question that stands at the doorway to true inner freedom. The pain body, which for so long seemed like an inescapable part of existence, is not who you are. It is a construct, an accumulation of past suffering that thrives on unconscious identification. But the moment awareness steps in, the illusion begins to crack. The grip of the pain body weakens, and what remains is something far greater. A state of being that is beyond suffering, beyond identity, beyond anything the mind can grasp. To fully understand this, there must first be a recognition of what identification with the pain body looks like. The pain body does not just appear as emotional distress. It embeds itself into identity. A person who has carried deep sadness for years may begin to see themselves as a sad person. Someone who has experienced repeated rejection may believe they are unlovable. A person who has endured years of struggle may internalize the belief that life is inherently difficult. These are not just emotions. They become the very foundation of self-perception. The pain body convinces the mind that this suffering is personal, that it defines who a person is. And as long as this belief remains, liberation is impossible. The first step in breaking free is a radical realization. You are not the pain. You are the one who observes it. The pain body is an energetic structure that arises and passes, but there is something deeper that never changes, the silent awareness that witnesses it all. This awareness is untouched by suffering. It remains steady, unshaken, no matter what emotions pass through. The moment this truth is seen, a shift begins. Instead of saying, "I am angry," there is now a recognition. Anger is arising, and I am the one witnessing it. This single shift removes the identification. The pain body loses its power the moment it is seen as something separate from who you are. Breaking free from pain identification does not mean suppressing emotions. It means fully experiencing them without attachment. When sadness arises, it is met with complete presence. It is allowed to exist, to be felt without resistance, but without attaching a story to it. There is no need to analyze why it's there, to connect it to past wounds, or to feed it with more thoughts. Instead, there is a simple, direct witnessing. Sadness is present. When met with full presence, emotions pass like clouds in the sky. They no longer take root. This is the key to true emotional freedom. Most people do not experience emotions directly. They experience their thoughts about emotions. A person may feel anger for a moment, but then the mind immediately intervenes. This shouldn't be happening. This always happens to me. I can't believe they treated me this way. The original emotion, which might have lasted only a few minutes, now turns into hours of suffering. This is how the pain body sustains itself. It feeds on thought. But without thought, emotions arise and dissolve naturally. The witness perspective is the most powerful tool for dissolving the pain body. Imagine sitting by a river, watching the water flow. Thoughts and emotions are like leaves floating downstream. Normally, the mind grabs onto them, analyzing, judging, resisting. But when awareness simply watches without interference, the leaves pass effortlessly. This is the practice of non-identification. The more this is cultivated, the less control the pain body has. At first, this practice may feel unnatural. The pull of identification is strong. The pain body has been reinforced for years, sometimes decades. But the moment presence is brought to it, a new possibility emerges. Instead of reacting automatically, there is space. Instead of being consumed by emotions, there is clarity. Each time this happens, the pain body weakens, can no longer run on autopilot. Transforming unconscious patterns requires deep inner stillness. Most people live in a state of reactivity, constantly responding to external circumstances, never truly aware of what is happening within. But real transformation occurs in stillness. When emotions arise, rather than reacting, there is a pause, a breath, a moment of complete presence. This is where old patterns begin to dissolve. One powerful method for breaking free is conscious observation. Whenever a strong emotional reaction occurs, instead of getting lost in it, there is a shift into awareness. What is happening in my body right now? Where do I feel this emotion physically? The pain body often manifests as sensations: tightness in the chest, tension in the stomach, a constriction in the throat. By bringing full attention to these sensations without judgment, their intensity begins to dissolve. Another method is inner inquiry. When a painful emotion arises, a simple question is asked: who is experiencing this? The immediate response may be, I am. But when attention turns inward, trying to locate this I, something profound happens. The identity that seemed so solid begins to dissolve. There is only awareness, only the silent presence that is untouched by any emotion. This is the ultimate truth: the pain body is not you. It is an illusion sustained by unconscious identification. Deep presence techniques accelerate this process. One such technique is radical acceptance. Instead of resisting pain, there is a complete opening to it. Whatever arises is fully allowed. Fear, sadness, anger, nothing is pushed away. This level of acceptance is transformative. The moment resistance disappears, suffering begins to dissolve. The pain body cannot survive in a state of full acceptance. Breath awareness is another powerful tool. Whenever the pain body activates, attention is brought to the breath. Slow, conscious breathing anchors awareness in the present moment. The breath becomes a bridge between thought and stillness, between unconscious reaction and conscious presence. With each inhale, there is expansion. With each exhale, release. This simple practice creates a gap between awareness and emotion, allowing for detachment from the pain body. Another advanced technique is the use of silence. The pain body thrives on inner noise, the endless mental commentary that fuels suffering. But in silence, there is nothing for it to attach to. Sitting in stillness without distractions, allowing all emotions to arise and pass without resistance, dissolves the deepest layers of pain. Signs of pain body transcendence begin to appear gradually. Emotional triggers lose their intensity. Situations that once caused immense suffering no longer have the same effect. There is a newfound lightness, a sense of space where heaviness used to be. Reactions become conscious rather than automatic. Instead of being consumed by negative emotions, they are observed with clarity. One of the most profound realizations is that without the pain body, there is no need to seek wholeness. The mind constantly searches for completion through relationships, achievements, external validation. But when the pain body dissolves, it becomes clear. There was never anything missing. Wholeness was always present, simply obscured by layers of suffering. The final step in pain body liberation is absolute surrender. Not as a passive resignation, but as an active allowing of what is. There is no longer a need to fight, to resist, to escape. Everything is met with presence. This is where true freedom is found, not in avoiding pain, but in seeing through the illusion that pain was ever who you were. When all pain dissolves, what remains is something beyond words. A silence so vast that no suffering can enter. A presence so still that nothing disturbs it. This is not something that needs to be achieved. It is already here. It has always been here, waiting to be recognized. You are not your pain body. You never were. You are the awareness beneath it all. Acceptance is the key to peace. Why does fighting reality create suffering? The answer is simple yet deeply transformative. Resistance to what is creates an inner battle that can never be won. The more the mind rejects the present moment, the more suffering arises. Life unfolds as it does, but the mind insists it should be different. This gap between reality and expectation is the source of almost all psychological pain. But what happens when resistance drops away? What if, instead of fighting against what is, there is a radical shift into total acceptance? The answer is profound. Acceptance is not passivity. It is the gateway to peace. Most people misunderstand acceptance. They equate it with resignation, as if accepting something means becoming indifferent or giving up. But true acceptance is not about passivity. It is the most powerful state a person can embody. To accept fully means to align with the flow of life rather than resisting it. It means embracing each moment as it is, without wishing it were different. This is the paradox. The more reality is accepted, the greater the sense of freedom. When resistance ceases, suffering dissolves. To see this clearly, imagine two people stuck in heavy traffic. One person tenses up, grows impatient, and complains about how terrible the situation is. Their mind spirals into frustration, replaying thoughts like, "This shouldn't be happening. I'm going to be late." And, "Why does this always happen to me?" The other person, sitting in the same traffic, simply accepts what is. They recognize that the traffic exists, that resistance will not change it, and that this moment is neither good nor bad, it simply is. They take a deep breath, relax their body, and remain fully present. The situation is the same for both, but one suffers while the other remains at peace. This is the power of acceptance. The paradox of total acceptance is that it does not lead to inaction but rather to conscious action. When life is resisted, decisions are made from fear, frustration, or desperation. But when life is accepted, decisions arise from clarity. Acceptance allows for a calm response rather than a reactive struggle. It creates a state of inner alignment, where actions flow effortlessly from presence rather than resistance. This understanding transforms every aspect of life. Consider relationships. When another person acts in a way that causes frustration, the mind immediately reacts. "They shouldn't be like this. They should treat me differently. This is unacceptable." But this resistance only fuels suffering. What if, instead, their behavior was simply accepted? Not in the sense of condoning harmful actions, but in the recognition that in this moment, they are as they are. With acceptance comes clarity. Instead of reacting, there is now space to respond with wisdom. The same applies to personal struggles, self-judgment, past regrets, fears about the future. The moment they are fully accepted, their power diminishes. Levels of acceptance practice deepen over time. At first, acceptance is seen as something to do, a conscious effort to accept situations as they arise. But deeper levels reveal that acceptance is not an act. It is a state of being. It is not something the mind does. It is something that naturally unfolds when identification with resistance drops away. True acceptance is effortless. It is the recognition that everything is already as it should be. Inner peace versus external circumstances is a fundamental realization. The mind believes that peace depends on external conditions, that if certain things go right, then peace will follow. But this is an illusion. Peace is not found in circumstances. It is found in the absence of resistance to those circumstances. A person who masters acceptance can remain at peace even in the face of chaos. This is why some people, even in extreme situations, remain unshaken. Their peace does not come from control over external events but from complete surrender to what is. Acceptance meditation techniques cultivate this state. One simple but powerful practice is to sit in stillness and observe whatever arises, without resistance. If thoughts appear, they are not pushed away. If emotions surface, they are not suppressed. Instead, everything is allowed. The body, the breath, the sensations, everything is accepted as it is in this moment. Over time, this practice rewires the mind. The tendency to resist weakens, and a deep stillness emerges. Another powerful technique is the practice of radical allowing. Throughout the day, whenever discomfort, frustration, or resistance arises, there is a conscious shift. Instead of reacting, there is an inward allowing. If anger arises, it is fully allowed. If sadness appears, it is welcomed. This does not mean indulging in negative emotions, but rather witnessing them without judgment. When emotions are fully accepted, they pass more quickly. Advanced surrender practices go even deeper. One such practice is to take a difficult situation and say internally, "I allow this completely." This statement shifts the energy instantly. Rather than fighting against the moment, there is a conscious surrender to it. This practice can be applied to anything: pain, uncertainty, fear. The more it is done, the more resistance dissolves. A deeper realization emerges. Acceptance is not about changing external reality, but about shifting internal perception. The world does not need to be controlled for peace to exist. The need to fix, change, or resist begins to fall away. Life is no longer seen as a problem to solve, but as an experience to witness. Measuring progress in acceptance is subtle. At first, resistance is strong, and the mind clings to old patterns. But over time, signs of deepening acceptance appear. Situations that once triggered frustration no longer have the same effect. There is an increasing ability to remain calm in uncertainty. The mind becomes less reactive, more spacious. There is an underlying sense of ease, even in the face of challenges. Another sign is a shift in perception. Instead of seeing events as good or bad, they are simply seen as experiences. There is a neutrality, a sense that everything is unfolding as it must. This does not mean that emotions disappear, but that they no longer have control. Anger may arise, but it is seen as passing energy. Fear may surface, but it is not believed. The space of awareness grows stronger than the emotions themselves. As this process deepens, life takes on a different quality. The constant struggle fades. There is a natural flow, an effortless presence. Challenges still arise, but they are met with clarity rather than resistance. Situations unfold, but they no longer dictate inner peace. There is an unshakable knowing that nothing needs to be different than it is. This is where the true power of acceptance is revealed. It is not just a technique. It is the very key to liberation. When everything is allowed, suffering ceases. When there is no more resistance, there is nothing left to struggle against. And in that space of pure acceptance, the deepest peace emerges. Not a temporary feeling, but a state that is always present, always accessible. The realization dawns. Peace was never something to be found. It was always here, beneath the layers of resistance. It was not hidden. It was only obscured by the mind's insistence that things should be different. The moment that illusion dissolves, the search ends. Peace is not something to seek. It is what remains when all resistance disappears. Fighting reality creates suffering. Accepting it creates freedom. This is the truth that transforms everything. Nothing external needs to change for inner peace to be realized. It has always been here, waiting in the background. The key is simple: stop resisting. Accept this moment fully, without conditions. In that acceptance, peace is already present. It always was. What if time itself is the greatest barrier to freedom? This question strikes at the very core of human suffering. The mind is constantly pulled between the past and the future, rarely resting in the only place where life actually happens, the present moment. People carry the weight of past experiences, regrets, and traumas, replaying them endlessly as if doing so will somehow change what has already happened. At the same time, they project themselves into an imaginary future, worrying about what may come, believing that happiness or peace will be found there. But the past is gone, and the future does not yet exist. The only reality is now. Understanding the psychology of time-based suffering is the first step toward freedom. The human mind is conditioned to believe that life is a timeline stretching from birth to death, with every moment defined by what came before and what is expected to come next. This illusion creates a deep sense of attachment to an identity based on past experiences and an endless striving toward a future that is always just out of reach. People say, "When I have more money, then I'll be happy," or "When I find the right relationship, then I'll feel complete." But when those things arrive, the mind simply moves the goalpost further, always seeking something else. The cycle never ends. Freedom from past-future fixation begins with recognizing this illusion. The past is nothing more than a collection of memories stored in the mind. It has no actual existence in this moment. Likewise, the future is just a projection of thoughts. It has not yet happened and never will happen as imagined. People assume that dwelling on the past gives them control over it or that worrying about the future somehow prepares them for it. But neither assumption is true. Life is only ever unfolding in the now. Present moment access points exist everywhere, but they are often overlooked. The breath is one such doorway. Every inhale and exhale happens only in the present moment. By bringing full attention to breathing, the mind is anchored in the now. Another access point is sensory awareness. Feeling the weight of the body, listening to sounds without labeling them, noticing the sensation of the air against the skin. These simple acts cut through mental time travel and bring direct experience of presence. Another powerful practice is observing thoughts without getting lost in them. Thoughts about the past and future arise constantly, but they do not need to be followed. Imagine each thought as a cloud drifting across the sky. Some clouds are dark and heavy, others light and fleeting, but none of them are permanent. By simply witnessing thoughts without attaching to them, they lose their grip. Time transcendence practices deepen this realization. One technique is to frequently ask, "Where is the past right now? And where is the future?" The answer is always the same: nowhere. Both exist only as mental concepts. The more this is realized, the less power time has over the mind. Another practice is to consciously dissolve past and future thinking by stating internally, "Only now exists." By reinforcing this truth, presence becomes stronger than mental time travel. A profound shift happens when time is no longer seen as the source of identity. Most people believe, "I am my past." They define themselves by their experiences, their successes, and their failures. But what if none of that is who they truly are? When all stories about the past are let go, what remains is pure presence, awareness itself unburdened by history. Likewise, the future is often seen as the place where happiness, success, or enlightenment will finally be attained. But this keeps peace forever out of reach. The realization that nothing needs to be added, that life is already whole as it is, dissolves the illusion that fulfillment exists somewhere in the future. Advanced timeless awareness techniques go even deeper. One such practice is full immersion in the now. This means treating each moment as if it were the only moment that exists, because it is. Walking without thinking about where the path leads. Eating without distraction. Speaking without planning the next sentence. When presence is total, time disappears. Another technique is breaking free from clock-based perception. While practical time is necessary for functioning in daily life, psychological time, the mind's attachment to past and future, is an illusion. A simple way to weaken this attachment is to spend time each day without checking clocks or calendars. Instead of measuring moments, they are simply experienced. Signs of freedom from time become evident over time. There is a growing sense of ease, as the need to control outcomes fades. Anxiety about the future diminishes. Regret about the past no longer holds weight. Each day feels lighter, more spacious. Time seems to slow down, not because the clock moves differently, but because awareness is no longer trapped in mental projections. One of the most powerful realizations is that life does not happen in time. It happens as time. Every moment is fresh, new, and independent of what came before. The idea of continuity is a mental construct. By seeing each moment as self-contained, the illusion of a personal timeline dissolves. The shift away from past-future thinking also transforms relationships. Arguments and conflicts are often rooted in history. People hold onto grievances, replaying old narratives. But what happens when those stories are dropped? The relationship becomes new in this moment, free from the weight of accumulated past hurts. Similarly, fear and worry about the future lose their grip. The mind loves to project worst-case scenarios, imagining everything that could go wrong. But none of those imagined futures exist. By returning attention to the now, fear is replaced by clarity. Decisions are made not from anxiety but from present-moment awareness. At the deepest level, freedom from time reveals the eternal nature of existence. The past and future belong to the realm of thought, but presence itself is beyond thought. It is the space in which all experiences arise and dissolve. Recognizing this brings a profound inner stillness. This is why Eckhart Tolle's teaching on time is so transformative. It is not about denying that events happen in sequence, but about seeing through the illusion that they define reality. The more presence deepens, the more it is seen that life is not a series of past experiences leading to a future destination. It is a single, unbroken now. Ultimately, time is not the problem. The mind's identification with time is. When that identification is loosened, suffering fades. Joy is no longer postponed. Peace is no longer conditional. The search for meaning shifts from someday to now. Life itself becomes enough exactly as it is. You are already whole and complete. What if nothing needs to be added to who you are? This question dissolves the entire premise upon which human striving is built. From childhood, people are conditioned to believe they are incomplete, that something is missing, that they need to improve, that they must become more before they can be enough. This belief fuels an endless search for fulfillment in achievements, relationships, possessions, and experiences. Yet, no matter what is attained, the feeling of incompleteness remains. Why? Because the search itself is based on an illusion. Wholeness has never been missing. It has only been overlooked. The myth of incompleteness is the foundation of human suffering. From an early age, people are taught to define themselves by external factors, what they accomplish, how others perceive them, how well they fit into societal expectations. This conditioning creates a sense of self that is constantly measuring, comparing, and seeking validation. The mind tells a story, I will be whole when I achieve this goal, or I will finally feel complete if I receive this approval. But the goal is never reached because even when one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place. The search continues, fueled by the same false premise, that something is lacking. This belief in incompleteness is reinforced by the mind's tendency to seek identity in form. People define themselves by their past experiences, their personal stories, their successes and failures. They mistake these temporary aspects of life for their true nature. But if identity is rooted in things that change, then a deep sense of insecurity is inevitable. What happens when the job is lost? When the relationship ends? When youth fades? The sense of self, built on shifting foundations, feels fragile, always in need of reinforcement. The truth is, wholeness is not something to be achieved. It is the natural state of being. It has never been absent, only obscured by false identification. The moment this is realized, the entire framework of seeking collapses. There is nothing to add, nothing to fix, nothing to become. The mind may resist this realization, arguing, but I still have problems, I still have flaws. Yet wholeness does not mean perfection in the conventional sense. It means recognizing that beneath all appearances, the essence of who you are has always been complete. Beyond seeking and becoming lies the simplicity of being. Seeking implies a gap between where you are and where you think you need to be. Becoming implies that the present is insufficient, that something more is required. But when attention shifts from seeking and becoming to simply being, a radical shift takes place. The need to chase after completion dissolves. What remains is a deep sense of enoughness, independent of circumstances. Self-completion practices help reinforce this understanding. One powerful method is to observe thoughts of lack as they arise. The mind may say, I need more success, or I need to improve myself, or I am not enough. Instead of believing these thoughts, they can be recognized as conditioned patterns, not ultimate truths. By questioning them, their power diminishes. Who is the I that needs improvement? Who is lacking? The deeper this inquiry goes, the clearer it becomes that the sense of lack is not inherent. It is learned. Another practice is shifting awareness from thoughts to direct experience. When thoughts of deficiency arise, they exist only in the mind. But in direct experience, in the present moment, nothing is missing. Simply feeling the breath, listening to sounds, or observing the body's sensations reveals that life is complete as it is. The mind may argue otherwise, but direct experience does not confirm the illusion of lack. Advanced wholeness recognition techniques deepen this realization. One such technique is recognizing the difference between doing and being. Most people are caught in a state of doing, always striving, improving, and fixing. But true fulfillment is found in simply being, existing without resistance, without chasing after a future state. This can be practiced by consciously pausing throughout the day and shifting into pure awareness. In those moments, the question arises, is anything truly missing right now? The answer is always no. Another advanced technique is reframing problems through the lens of completeness. When faced with a challenge, instead of thinking, I need to fix this to be okay, the perspective shifts to, wholeness is already here, even with this challenge. This does not mean ignoring practical solutions, but it removes the belief that problems define identity or diminish worth. Challenges come and go, but they do not affect the core being. Signs of realized completeness begin to appear naturally. The constant need for external validation fades. The urgency to prove oneself diminishes. The habit of comparing with others loses its grip. There is a quiet sense of sufficiency, even when external circumstances are imperfect. Decisions are no longer driven by fear of not being enough, but by an inner clarity that is not dependent on outcomes. Relationships also transform with this realization. When the belief in incompleteness is strong, relationships are often based on seeking fulfillment in another person. The unspoken thought is, I need this person to make me feel whole. But when wholeness is recognized as the natural state, relationships shift from dependency to sharing. Instead of trying to extract something from others, there is an overflow of presence, connection, and love because nothing is missing. The search for meaning also changes. Many people seek meaning in external achievements, believing they must leave a legacy or accomplish great things to validate their existence. But when wholeness is realized, meaning is no longer tied to external outcomes. Life itself becomes meaningful not because of what is achieved, but simply because it is. The need to prove oneself through accomplishments fades, replaced by a deep appreciation for existence itself. This is why the statement, "You are already whole and complete," is so revolutionary. It challenges the very foundation of how people have been conditioned to think about themselves. It removes the need for endless self-improvement, not in the sense of neglecting growth, but in realizing that growth happens naturally without the belief in deficiency. It shifts the focus from fixing to recognizing, from seeking to seeing. At the deepest level, wholeness is not even personal. It is not about you as an individual being complete. It is about the nature of existence itself. Everything in life arises and dissolves within a field of awareness that has never been broken or divided. This awareness, which is what you truly are, is already whole. The sense of incompleteness was only ever a trick of the mind. When this truth is fully absorbed, a profound relaxation occurs. The tension of always needing to get somewhere dissolves. The feeling of not enough fades into the background. Life is no longer approached as a problem to be solved, but as something to be fully experienced. The chase ends. What remains is presence, peace, and the recognition that nothing was ever missing. Ultimately, the realization of wholeness is not something to be attained. It is something to remember. It has always been here, waiting to be seen. The moment the illusion of lack is exposed, freedom arises. The endless search stops. And in that stillness, in that simplicity, in that presence, wholeness is known. When you become aware of your thoughts, you are no longer controlled by them. How does awareness break the spell of thinking? This question points to a fundamental truth about the mind. Thoughts only have power when they go unnoticed. They appear automatically, shaping perception, influencing emotions, and dictating behavior. Yet most people are so identified with their thoughts that they never question their validity. They assume every thought reflects reality. But what happens when awareness is introduced? The moment a thought is observed rather than blindly followed, its grip weakens. Awareness creates space, and in that space, true freedom begins. The mechanics of thought control operate in a subtle yet powerful way. Thoughts arise in rapid succession, forming an unbroken stream of mental activity. This stream creates an inner narrative, a continuous story about who you are, what the world is like, and what will happen in the future. These stories shape identity, emotions, and decisions. Yet the vast majority of thoughts are repetitive and unconscious. They are conditioned patterns, often rooted in past experiences and societal programming. If left unexamined, they dictate reality, keeping people trapped in cycles of fear, anxiety, and limitation. Thoughts, by their very nature, demand attention. The mind does not like silence. It constantly seeks something to focus on. When a thought arises, it feels urgent, important, even real. But just because a thought appears does not mean it is true. Most thoughts are distortions, exaggerations, assumptions, memories mixed with imagination. Yet people rarely question them. They assume that because they think something, it must be valid. This is the fundamental illusion that keeps thought control in place. Freedom through pure awareness begins the moment thinking is observed rather than unconsciously followed. A thought arises, and instead of immediately believing it, there is a pause. In that pause, a shift occurs. The realization that the thought is not the observer. The one witnessing the thought is separate from the thought itself. This gap between thought and awareness is the key to liberation. The more this gap is recognized, the less power thoughts have. Instead of being swept away by mental narratives, they are seen as passing clouds in the sky of consciousness. Mastery of mental patterns requires consistent observation. The first step is simply noticing the types of thoughts that arise most often. Are they fearful, judgmental, regretful, future-focused? The content of thought is less important than the recognition that it is happening. The moment a thought is seen clearly, its ability to dictate emotions and actions is diminished. A powerful awareness cultivation technique is labeling thoughts as they arise. Instead of being absorbed in thinking, thoughts are mentally categorized: worry, judgment, memory, prediction. This simple act of labeling creates space between the thinker and the thought. It transforms unconscious identification into conscious observation. Over time, the habit of identifying with every thought weakens, and a deeper awareness emerges. Another effective technique is questioning thoughts directly. When a thought appears, instead of accepting it at face value, it can be challenged. Is this thought absolutely true? What evidence do I have? What happens when I believe it? Who would I be without this thought? This process reveals how many thoughts are merely assumptions, not facts. By questioning them, their power fades. Advanced consciousness practices deepen this detachment. One such practice is watching the gap between thoughts. Normally, attention is on the content of thinking, but between each thought, there is a brief moment of stillness. By shifting awareness to these gaps, the mind begins to quiet. The realization grows that thoughts arise within awareness, but awareness itself is beyond thought. Another advanced technique is observing the energy of thoughts rather than their content. Each thought carries a certain vibration. Some feel heavy, some restless, some expansive. Instead of analyzing thoughts, simply noticing how they feel reveals their effect on consciousness. With practice, a natural tendency emerges to let go of thoughts that feel restrictive and align with those that bring clarity. Measuring mental freedom comes through experience. The less reactive one is to thoughts, the more freedom exists. Signs of progress include a reduction in compulsive thinking, less emotional attachment to mental narratives, and an ability to witness thoughts without being disturbed by them. Instead of being lost in thought, there is a spaciousness, a background presence that remains undisturbed no matter what the mind produces. This shift has profound effects on daily life. Decision-making becomes clearer because choices are not clouded by unconscious fears and assumptions. Emotional stability increases because reactions are no longer driven by unquestioned mental stories. Relationships improve because awareness brings a deeper level of listening and presence, rather than reacting based on mental projections. One of the most powerful realizations in this process is that thoughts do not define you. The mind generates thoughts automatically, just as the heart beats and the lungs breathe. Yet no one identifies as their heartbeat or their breath. In the same way, thoughts are simply mental events. They arise, exist for a moment, and fade. They are not personal. They do not reflect ultimate truth. They are not who you are. The most persistent illusion is that the thinker and the thought are the same. But the moment a thought is witnessed rather than blindly followed, the separation becomes clear. There is the thought, and then there is the one watching the thought. The more attention shifts to the watcher rather than the thought itself, the freer one becomes. This is the essence of Eckhart Tolle's insight. When you become aware of your thoughts, you are no longer controlled by them. The key is not to stop thinking, but to stop being controlled by thought. Thought is a tool, a function of the mind, but it is not the master. Awareness is the master. At first, the mind may resist this shift. It may try to pull attention back into thinking, creating thoughts like, "This is pointless," or "I can't do this." But the very presence of these thoughts is proof that they are not the observer. If a thought can be seen, then it is not who you are. Eventually, as awareness deepens, a profound peace arises. The noise of the mind is still there, but it no longer dominates. Thoughts come and go, but they do not shake the stillness underneath. This stillness is the true self, the ever-present awareness that has never been touched by thought. It has always been there, unnoticed, hidden beneath identification with mental activity. As this realization deepens, life changes in fundamental ways. Fear-based thinking loses its power. The tendency to replay the past or anticipate the future diminishes. The need for external validation fades. There is a quiet, unshakable presence that remains, no matter what thoughts arise. Ultimately, this is not about controlling thoughts, but about seeing them clearly. The mind will continue to generate thoughts. It is what it does. But when they are seen for what they are, they lose their grip. Thought no longer dictates reality. Awareness takes its place. And in that awareness, true freedom is found. Closing integration. The insights explored throughout this journey have the power to reshape the way reality is experienced. Each of Eckhart Tolle's teachings is not just an intellectual idea but a doorway into a deeper state of awareness. The realization that you are not your thoughts, the invitation to live fully in the present moment, the recognition of the ego's illusion, and the dissolution of the pain body, all of these point toward a singular truth. Freedom exists here and now. For most people, suffering is an unconscious habit. It stems from an unquestioned belief in mental narratives, attachment to identity structures, and an emotional investment in pain patterns. But what happens when these layers begin to dissolve? When thoughts are seen rather than followed? When presence replaces resistance? When the past and future lose their grip? The result is a profound shift, a life lived with clarity, ease, and an unshakable sense of inner peace. Awareness is not something to achieve. It is already here. It is the silent background in which every thought, emotion, and experience unfolds. The problem is that most people are so absorbed in the content of their minds that they overlook the awareness that is always present. But when attention shifts away from thoughts and into the simple, immediate experience of now, something incredible happens. The mental noise fades into the background, leaving behind an unmistakable stillness. This stillness is not dull or empty. It is vibrant, alive, and filled with an intelligence far beyond conceptual thinking. The key is practice. Intellectual understanding alone does not lead to transformation. The mind can grasp these concepts, But true freedom is only realized through direct experience. This is why awareness practices, presence exercises, and ego dissolution techniques are essential. They bridge the gap between theory and lived experience. They take abstract concepts and turn them into a felt reality. One of the most effective ways to integrate these insights is through self-inquiry. Simply asking, who is aware of these thoughts? Or where's my attention right now? Can disrupt habitual identification with mental activity. Every time awareness shifts from thought to presence, even for a second, a new pathway is formed in consciousness. Over time, this pathway strengthens, making presence the default state rather than mental noise. A useful framework for ongoing practice involves 3 stages: recognition, observation, and stabilization. Recognition is the first step. It involves noticing how the mind operates, how thoughts arise automatically, how the ego creates identity, and how suffering is perpetuated through attachment to stories. Without this recognition, unconscious patterns continue unchecked. The simple act of seeing these patterns already weakens their power. Observation is the practice of sustained awareness. Instead of reacting to thoughts, emotions, and external events, there is a conscious witnessing of them. The mind becomes something that is watched rather than something that dictates experience. This stage deepens presence and loosens the grip of identification with the mind. Stabilization is when presence becomes the natural state. The sense of being the observer rather than the thinker becomes effortless. Instead of presence being something that must be practiced, it is simply what remains when mental identification fades. This stage is not an endpoint but an ongoing deepening. There is no final enlightenment to reach, just an ever-expanding awareness that continues to unfold. As this process unfolds, fear diminishes. The ego thrives on fear because fear keeps identification with the separate self intact. But when presence takes root, fear loses its foundation. Without identification with thought, without resistance to what is there to fear? Most fears are mental projections about a future that does not exist. When life is lived moment to moment, without the burden of imagined scenarios, fear is replaced by trust. Not a blind trust in external circumstances, but a deep trust in the intelligence of life itself. Another profound shift is the release of struggle. So much energy is spent fighting against reality, resisting situations, battling thoughts, trying to change emotions. But this resistance only fuels suffering. When the need to fight against life dissolves, there is a natural relaxation into the present moment. Challenges still arise, but they are met with clarity rather than struggle. Instead of reacting blindly, there is space to respond with wisdom. The ego will resist this shift. It thrives on control, on constant mental activity, on defining itself through comparison, judgment, and self-importance. When awareness begins to dissolve these patterns, the ego may create distractions, doubt, impatience, a need to intellectualize everything. But these are just more thoughts, more mental noise trying to pull attention away from presence. If they are seen for what they are, they lose their power. Emotional patterns also undergo transformation. The pain body, which feeds on past wounds and unconscious suffering, weakens as presence strengthens. Without identification, emotions pass through without becoming identities. Sadness, anger, frustration. These emotions may still arise, but they no longer define who you are. They are temporary experiences moving through awareness, nothing more. This shift alone brings an extraordinary sense of inner freedom. A practical way to measure progress is through self-reflection. Ask, am I spending less time lost in thought? Do I react less to situations that used to trigger me? Is there more space between thought and action? Do I experience more moments of stillness and clarity? Is my sense of identity shifting away from the mind? These are not checkboxes to complete but indicators of transformation. There is no need for judgment. Every moment of awareness, no matter how brief, is movement in the right direction. At its core, this path is about realizing what has always been true. You are not your mind, not your emotions, not your past. You are the awareness in which all of these things appear and disappear. When this truth is directly experienced, rather than just intellectually understood, everything changes. The greatest paradox is that nothing needs to be done to reach this realization. It is already here. The only requirement is to stop searching outside and turn attention inward. The more presence is cultivated, the more the illusion of separation dissolves. And as separation dissolves, what remains is an effortless, silent joy, the natural state that has always been there, hidden beneath identification with thought. In the end, this journey is not about achieving something new. It is about returning to what has always been. It is not about adding more knowledge but shedding the layers that obscure what is already present. No matter where you are on this path, no matter how much the mind tries to complicate it, the answer is always the same. Come back to now. Right here, in this moment, is the freedom you have been seeking.